Hey, everybody, we get started. Hey, welcome to the St. Lucia Parks truck study for Camelback Road. My name is Keith Juransky. I'm on the basis on the city engineer. I am filling in for Matthew Williams, who is unable to be here. He's still under the weather. But we have him virtually. There's his happy smiling face up on the screen. Everybody wave. So I want to say thank you to the mayor, vice mayor, and members in attendance today. Start off with introductions. Again, my name is Keith. I will be moderating this along with some of these folks here at the table. So I'll start off.
Hey, thank you all for being here. My name is Paige Peterson from this Humanity City. Also helped to cover from Matthew tonight.
I don't know if you could all hear us, Brad. But all right, so Mac did one of the studies, so we'll let them have a chance to talk tonight. We also have on virtual is a city traffic consultant is next one. So we have, my understanding, Caitlin, are you online?
Yep, I'm here. Nice to meet you all.
Join us. So what's bringing us here today is that we have a truck study that was performed by Maricopa Association of Governments. We also have a truck study that I mentioned that was completed by a consultant for the city, Exxon. For the MAG study, it was started back in December of 2022 and wrapped up January of 23. Is that when we had it? I'm sorry, let me take that back. January 23 is when we got rolling data collection, and then it was March of this year when the study was completed. Around that same time is when Exponent study was commissioned as well. So let me go over the agenda really quick. So today we'll talk about the history and how, where, why we're here, and that'll be discussed by Paige. Mag is going to provide a discussion, and they brought slides from some excerpts from the study, and we'll go over some of the data in that. And so will Exponent. After that, we'll get into some conclusions, recommendations, next steps, and that'll be where Matthew will come back and talk. And then at the very end, we'll do some Q&A. So on the Q&A, everybody gets a chance to speak, but you have to fill out a comment card. So what's going to happen is walk around with the microphone. We'll have a comment card, and we'll call on names. We'll give you the microphone, and then you'll have up to about 3 minutes to speak. Questions, concerns, and panel members will be able to respond. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Paige.
Thank you, Keith. As you mentioned, I'm going to go over the history of the city's truck restrictions, as well as how Camelback was brought into the city and how the restrictions impacted that. Going way back to 1987, when the city was first incorporated, the city did through truck restrictions on every city street except for Litchfield Road. And that stayed unchanged up until 2020. At that time, the city changed the truck route from Litchfield Road to Dysart Road, and that was because of the Litchfield Square development. That ordinance also established separate truck restrictions for Litchfield Square. So in March of 2022, after multiple council meetings and discussions, the council decided to annex Camelback Road from Maricopa County. Since Camelback was a city road after the annexation, it automatically fell under those 1987 truck restrictions. So at that point, city staff sent out over 100 letters to the local trucking company to inform them of these restrictions, to give them time to plan, and that those restrictions would begin on May 1st of 2022. City staff also sent letters to our state legislators informing them of the Camelback Road restrictions in March that same time period. 1 month later, Arizona revised statutes Title 28 was amended. And a section of that was dropped. So what that did is it prevented truck restrictions on major arterial and only affected cities with truck restrictions after December 31st of 2019. And we just wanted to point out that the only city that had put truck restrictions into place after that date was Litchfield. So after multiple discussions with Senate leaders, the Trucking Association, the Rock Product, various stakeholders, we have decided to place a moratorium on the truck restrictions until a truck study can be conducted. That truck study, we wanted to show the traffic, the sound, the vibration, and do the vehicle counts. So in August of that same year, Maricopa Association of Governments, that's when they began that truck study at a cost of about $350,000. In December of 2022, some of you may have attended, we had that public input meeting regarding the truck study. We had many citizens attend. We had representatives from the trucking industry, and there were some ideas that were proposed, such as study the Jake brake, incorporating the Jake brake ordinance for engine brake, and reducing speed limits on Camelback Road. So in January 2023, the first reading of the city ordinance to limit the use of engine braking in Litchfield Park was read. Also in that same month, the first reading of Senate Bill 1097, the first reading was done of Senate Bill 1097 that eliminated truck restrictions on major arterials. And it also identified major arterials as roads that would connect two interstates or have underpasses. So essentially, Camelback Road fell into that category. So at that point, that was approved by the governor on April 11, 2020. At that point, our hands were really tied. There wasn't anything we could do as far as truck restrictions because that would have violated state law. At that point, we had felt that the agreement that we had made with the various stakeholders had been violated. We thought we could wait until the MAC study was complete so we could see what mitigation efforts that study would reveal. Moving on to September 2023, we reduced the speed limit on Camelback Road as well as Litchfield Road down to 35 miles per hour. Then in March of 24, Litchfield Park became a charter city with 82% of the vote and signed into law by Governor Hobbs. Spring of 24, MAG finalized the truck study. And we also, MAG did a fantastic job on this study, but the city wanted to go a little bit deeper and just see another viewpoint. So we selected a company called Exponent to further evaluate this issue. So here we are tonight, having a second public input meeting, so you can hear the results of both studies. There will also be a discussion with recommendations to council. And finally, I would just like to point out that for years, we've been hearing from you all. We receive emails, phone calls, and we read the letters in the paper about this issue and how it's impacting your quality of life with the loud truck traffic and pollution. So I hope that I respond to all of them that I get. Some of those do go to my junk mail, so I apologize if I haven't responded, but we are seeing those and we do hear you. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Matt to start the MAC.
Thank you. Okay, I can do that. Yeah. All right. So let me start by telling you who MAG is, Maricopa Association of Governments. We are a collection, I guess you would say, of all the mayors of all the cities in Maricopa County, cities and towns, Maricopa County itself, also in Pinal County, a total of 27 cities and towns. We are run by the mayors, all of those entities, or senior representatives of them, and we address regional issues, transportation being one of them. It's not a decision-making body in terms of what cities do, but we provide information to cities. So when this issue came up, we were asked to take a look at it and see if we could provide some technical information to help. At the time, they came to us in 2022. And at that time, that was before the state legislature had taken any action. The question was, how can we find a solution to this problem? Our response to that was, well, we can't tell you how you can do that, but what we can do is we can provide information. We can look at the problem, we can quantify it, we can tell you how much worse we think it's going to get, and we can look at some solutions and analyze how well they might work. And we'll provide you that information, but we won't give you any recommendations. We think that this is a decision the city and other stakeholders would have to make together. So that's how we entered the study. There are three parts now to this presentation. We looked at the problem, and we looked at the future, and then we looked at some potential remedies. So I'll quickly go through all of those. Finding the problem. The problem, as we understood it, basically was being raised by the community. It was loud trucks and vibration and other vehicles at night, causing people to wake up from a sound sleep. And that was the primary issue that we had to address. See if we could really get to understand the cause and see if we could find some solutions. We started that by collecting a lot of data, and as you would understand, if a ban of trucks on Camelback Road were to be enacted or be enforced, the trucks would have to go somewhere else. And so we chose a fairly large area that we call the Southwest Valley. And it basically goes up to Northern Parkway and to the freeways around the other three sides of the area, and collected data for that whole area. We double checked on all the land uses with the local jurisdictions throughout this area to be sure we had the right estimates for existing and also future. We did a lot of traffic counts and we built models to what would allow us to not only understand better what's going on today, but allow us to make a forecast into the future. We looked at different types of trucks and made sure that the data that we were collecting included heavy trucks. And in addition to that, as I mentioned, we did build models. On to the next slide. There we go. We also did a lot of counts for noise and vibration as well, so that we could get a good understanding of the whole problem. That allowed us also to build a noise model, and I'll talk a bit later about the findings of that noise model, but it would help us to understand noise levels today, but also what the noise levels would be like. And here are our findings. Everything I'm going to talk about now in the next few slides, it's going to be about daily traffic. What is the daily amount of traffic? How many of them are trucks? We look at daily traffic because our models give us the most reliable results at that level, and we wanted to use them for forecasting. So what we found from this, as you look at this diagram, you see different widths on the lines making up the streets in the study area. The wider the line, the higher the overall daily traffic is. As the lighter color, the lower the truck percentages. These again are on daily. So what we found is that there really are very few continuous roads that go all the way through the study area, east to west or north. From that, you would think that there would be a very high percentage of traffic using Camelback Road. But on a daily basis, you can see here, it doesn't stand out as being a super high traffic road. So it doesn't seem to be disproportionate to the other roads in the area. And I think one of the reasons for that, of course, is it's a narrow road, which is a disincentive for many people to use it. Here we go. Okay, this slide is looking at trucks only. And there are two colors. The dark green lines are total trucks on a daily basis. The yellow lines represent the trucks that have a stop in Litchfield Park, the local trucks. So what you can see here, again, is that Camelback Road on a daily basis does not jump out. It's being targeted for more truck trips. That a good proportion of those trips are that go through Camelback Road are in fact local trips that have to stop. So we also, at this point, learned more about the noise that's happening. And noise is a very complex issue, and the models that look at noise are very complex. In our report, there's a lot of pages in there that talk about it if you're interested in understanding that. But what I just want to point out now is that we look at noise in 3 levels. Noise is generated at the source. There are things you can do at the source. Then it has to travel a distance before it gets to the receiver. There are things that can be done for that area in the middle. And then there are, of course, at the receiver, there are things that can be done then to deal with noise. And the noise level is actually different in each of those areas as well. So what we're looking at here is a diagram of noise readings that we took. We actually measured the noise every 5 seconds for all night, I think from about 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night until about 7 o'clock in the morning for 3 different days. And as you can see, that's a lot of data points. The one thing that we found from this is that the background noise level on Camelback Road is pretty low. And that becomes an important factor as we start looking into this. But we also noticed there are a lot of spikes that go above that dark blue line, which are when the noise is higher. And of course, not every one of those spikes is so loud that it creates the nuisance that you have experienced. And so we need to look at this much more closely. And what we did is we stretched out those lines so that we could take a closer look at them. And when we do that, can you change the slide for me? There we go. It looks something like this. So what you see here is that for a large portion of the time, noise is pretty soft. But then you have these spikes when something happens and the noise gets very loud very quickly. That is the kind of situation that would cause somebody to wake up out of a sound sleep, because there would be this low level of noise and then suddenly, boom, something comes really fast. So what we wanted to do is see if we could find where there were events that might create that nuisance. We called those events potential nuisance events. And the way we found that is we would take our noise model and we got readings from all of those every 5 seconds of that noise. If we looked at the very loudest ones, and then we would say, okay, which of these are so loud that by the time it gets to the residential homes, it's loud enough to wake somebody up. And we looked at those, and there actually are numbers that we can get from documentation where 75 decibel is a good number to use. Something above that is considered a nuisance. So we looked for those events where the noise level was more than 75 decibels at the nearest homes. And we found that there were a few of them. What we call those potential nuisance events because they would be loud enough, but it wouldn't wake them up unless it was very, very quiet for that happened. So this is a potential. We don't think there were any actually people who were woken up out of their sleep on the days that we did counts, we didn't get any report of that. So we were just trying to identify when the sound was loud enough that there was the potential that it could become a nuisance event. We'll move on to the next slide. And we did the same thing for vibration, and we found that vibration is very much the same, but they have sound, they're not entirely correlated, but the process is the same. Going on to the next slide. So when we did that, we found that there were 27 events during the 3 nights that we were looking at, where the noise level would get loud enough and have the potential to wake someone up. That's not. And what we found out of these 27 events is that 2/3 of them were heavy trucks, but the other third were other kinds of vehicles, including buses and motorcycles and other automobiles. Now, if we go to the next slide, let's look at the 5 loudest events and see what they were. The loudest event is a truck, it's a heavy truck. But then out of the next 4 loudest, they're motorcycles and cars. So what we learned from that is that it's not all trucks. There are other vehicles that have the potential to create this noise. But it has to be a combination of a noise that's very loud that comes suddenly after a period that's very soft. And that's not something that we can predict, but this allowed us by quantifying what the number of events that are loud enough to possibly do this. We can then look at that and see how it grows over time and how different remedies can reduce that number. We go to the next slide. Now let's look at the future. Next slide, please. Again, now we have models to work with, so we work again with the jurisdictions to get future year numbers, especially for truck generators in the area, and make sure that was in the model. And then we looked out to the year 2040 to see how things would change. Next slide. There's a lot of numbers here, but I only want to point to one, and that's the one that's 60%. What that says is total traffic on Camelback Road by 2040 will be 60% higher than what it was in 2022 when we took the count. Go to the next slide, please. Again, a whole lot of numbers, but this is now looking at truck trips. And on Camelback Road, the number of truck trips will grow by 118%. For all trucks, and for trucks that have stopped in Litchfield Park, it'll grow by about 40%. Now, again, these are daily numbers, and we use this to get growth factors. We didn't actually do an analysis of what the truck percentage is during the nighttime, but what we did is we counted how many heavy trucks were on the road during the nighttime, on the same days where we did all of our data collection for the noise and the vibration. And so we take these growth factors and then we apply them to the number of trucks that we counted on those days. And that gives us an estimate of what, how much growth there will be and what the number of potential nuisance events would be in 2040. We go to the next slide. Here again, the numbers in the circles, we said we had noted 27 potential nuisance events in 2022. That doubles to 53 in 2040. So that gives us a sense of how much worse the problem might get over time. Go to the next slide. So what are the potential remedies? Remember that I mentioned there are 3 different ways to deal with this. You have noise being made at the source, you have noise being made in the path that gets you to the receiver, and then at the receiver. So we looked at different remedies for each of these locations. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, this one's a little hard to read. With the highest scoring remedies that we found were a ban on trucks. Even though not all of the vehicles are trucks, the majority of the vehicles are trucks. And so the ban has a very large reduction in the number of those events that are potential nuisance events. see them there. What the top one is an all-day ban on trucks. One further down is just a nighttime ban on trucks, but during the nighttime, they would have the same overall benefit. But it wouldn't remove out all of them because trucks are not all of the vehicles that are loud enough to cross those events. Then you see there's a red line and there are 2 red stars underneath that. Those are looking at the receiver. That would be the homes, at the homes. And we found that there are some things that have a very high benefit to the homes. But unfortunately, it's hard to implement those retroactive. One of those is to have a longer buffer area. So build the homes further away from the road, put stores or, businesses close to the road and have the homes further away. That's something we can do in new development, but it's hard to do that for the existing development. And the other one is there are things you can do. You can build the homes with more sound insulation in the external walls, with fewer windows facing the road, things like that. Again, that's hard to do when the homes are already there. And then at the end of this, we came up with one other, I should make a couple other comments. Sound walls, look at sound walls. There are 2 reasons why sound walls don't have the same level of effect. The first one is that the sound wall is only high enough to block the sound from a first floor bedroom. But a second floor bedroom is up in the air and the sound wall is not reducing the noise there. And the second reason is that especially the very low volume noises, that come out of a loud radio or other things, a highly accelerating big engine. Those are low frequency noises. Well, those low frequencies have a very long wave. And as it gets louder, it gets very hot. And it just bounces right over the wall because the frequency is so big. So for those reasons, we don't think that, we just rated it as being less effective. And so we ended up with one final one at the bottom. I'm sorry, can you go back just for one more? At the very bottom, we have one more. And this one is if you could find a way to sit down at the table and talk to some of the generators of noise, whether they be trucks or motorcycles or others, and work out an understanding and good faith to work together. Much of the noise that creates the nuisance is more of a driver behavior than it is a vehicle operated noise. And so these are things that can be dealt with on a voluntary basis. So we threw that one out also as a possibility. Remember at the beginning, I said that our objective here was to get an understanding of the problem, try to forecast how much worse it's going to get over time, and to look at remedies. But we were not making recommendations because it's not part of what we do to suggest to cities what they should do. That's for the city to decide and the other stakeholders that are involved in this. So at that point, our work is now finished. That information is available for all of the stakeholders to have the same amount of technical information available to them as the system is being discussed.
All right, thank you, Brad. He is right about that. You have a broad topic instead. Good reading. That's one thing. That could go over. So at this point,
Keep talking to the microphone.
sorry, a little quiet. At this point, we're going to move on to the exponent portion. And Caitlin, are you still on?
Yep, I'm here. Can you guys all hear me clearly?
A little bit. You might have to talk a little louder, but you're there.
Okay. All right, well, thank you everyone for the opportunity to share our work. We were contacted by council for Litchfield, the city of Litchfield Park. And the ones leading this investigation were myself, So my PhD is in vibration analysis, and of course, acoustics are an aspect of vibration, and I'm a registered PE in multiple states, Arizona being one of them. And I was assisted by Daniel Mennett, who's not only also a PhD in vibration and acoustics, also a professional engineer, and he's also INC board certified, which is kind of the PE equivalent for acoustics. So he's quite knowledgeable, and we were supported by a large team of folks because the work we did was, we were contacted in July of this year, and so the work we did was in a pretty compressed time frame, but we do think we have some useful information to share. So if you could move on. Back one. There we go. All right, so at a very high level, to give you an idea of what we aimed for, we were provided with the MAG study and a bunch of resident complaints discussing truck noise. Based on that information, we conducted a study that included collection of field data. So that included acoustic measurements, vibration measurements, traffic and truck video recording, and truck engine identification and route observation. So obviously the MAG study goes a bit more in depth with the 12 months of work and more locations, but we did use their results to kind of focus where we wanted to take a look at, both to confirm some of the findings and explore some additional aspects, including some of the health effects that weren't necessarily reflected in the results. So on the right, you can see examples of the locations we were looking at. The red dotted line shows how these two maps are connected side by side. Once we had our collection of field data, we also developed a traffic noise model to look at the effects of different types of solutions. We looked at the evaluation of truck emission and particulate concerns as well. That wasn't something that was necessarily explored, and there are some troubling aspects in that respect. And then considering possible solutions was our final step. You can go to the next slide. So the first thing that was very notable in our study was the sheer volume of trucks. So we get contracted for a variety of investigations, and there's sometimes where you hear the complaints and you go and you can see why there's an issue. But in this case, we were actually pretty shocked by the minute we got there, people would start their shifts, they'd turn onto the road, they'd park where we were observing from, and they'd look up and there would be a truck. And it really was kind of a exciting observation period, because sometimes observation periods are very boring. That was not the case with this. All of our workers were quite busy all the time because trucks were very prevalent. So one of the takeaways that we noticed, the MAG study, as I think they mentioned, was from a year or two ago, and they had conducted the study and forecasted growth of the 113.3% that you heard in the earlier presentation. And my understanding was that was in an 18-year period. So we came along 2 years after the fact, and in one day we saw 858 trucks along Camelback Road. So that's growth of 39%, and that's in just 2 years. So we think part of the reason could be that the truck ratio used by the MAG study was a little bit lower. We found that between 4 a.m. and 7 a.m., the truck ratio was more than 20% of the total traffic. And the graph on the right shows the MAG study truck ratio with the blue dotted line. And so you can see that, sure, in areas it's lower, but there's also areas, particularly during those early morning hours where people are still sleeping, that ratio is quite high. This isn't to disparage the MAG study in any way. It's just one kind of difference in something that was observed. And so we think that growth is something to be considered. So we wanted to make sure that that was shared here. Next slide. So to discuss the numbers, this is one example. This was eastbound vehicles at location 4 for a 24-hour period during July and August. They were right at the end of July in 2024. So it's important to note here that the scales for the shaded heavy truck and medium truck counts are different than the scale for the blue line. So the blue line has the actual total numbers of vehicles for each hour. So you can see that peak right there during the 8 a.m. morning rush hour had 893 vehicles go by. Of those, if you take a look at the yellow and blue, about 60 of those were those two types of trucks. And so that's where all these numbers come from. We had both manual counting. We also developed a program that will actually count the trucks going by, which is pretty handy for additional data collection. Next slide. Same idea here for the westbound. And it's actually, if you could jump back to the previous slide for just a second and see that blue peak occurs in the early morning, and then jump to the next slide again. And now westbound, that's commute traffic coming home. But you can see the same trend does not hold for the heavy trucks. So heavy trucks are still heaviest westbound from 4 a.m. to about 8 a.m. So what this is showing us is that from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m., both eastbound and westbound have a significant number of trucks, even as the traffic patterns change. So trucks are going both directions along Camelback Road in a pretty similar number. Next slide. This was the actual traffic count, if anyone's interested in the raw data. So you can see if you click to advance the slide, it should highlight. There you go. So you can see between, I skew between 4 a.m. and 8 a.m., 3 a.m. and 7 a.m. Either way, it's those early morning hours. Interestingly, we had heard resident complaints of truck noise even in the late evening, 10 p.m., 11 p.m. We saw less of that, and we saw more of these early morning hours. That may be a seasonal aspect, but this was the data that we counted for our period. So next slide. So jumping ahead to the possible solutions, both our work and the MAG study indicated disturbances caused by truck noise along Camelback Road. I was happy to see the earlier presenter mention the potential nuisance events and the low background noise level of Camelback Road. And that's important because sound obviously is a perceived phenomenon. And so you are much more likely to be disturbed by noises in a quiet environment than you are in a noisy environment. So in this case, we saw evidence that these potential nuisance events were indeed disturbing residents. That is really where the type of complaints come from. We also took quite a few acoustic measurements from residences and did the calculations to figure out what, based on the types of windows they had and walls, what would the outside measurement have to be for them to hear something that was disturbing in the house. And that is exceeded for many of those nuisance events. So overall, as we considered, and I'm jumping over a lot of details here, but in terms of the best option for the city when all of the factors are considered, which include not only the actual reduction in noise as modeled by the sound models that we put together, but also consideration of the immediacy of the solution and the cost of the solution, the total through truck ban would be the best option to address both sound and emissions health concerns. So I'll take a moment here to chat about the emissions aspect. For this, I will say measurement of emissions directly from vehicles is pretty involved and almost impossible if you're, following a truck or don't have access to the vehicle. So we weren't necessarily measuring emissions directly from trucks, but what we can do is based on the photographs and the license plate and the identification of those trucks, we can identify the engines that are in the trucks, when they were produced, and what their kind of emissions results are. And we were a bit surprised to find that there are quite a few quite aged trucks in this collection. So as one example, trucks that are traveling along Camelback Road might be manufactured as early as 1991. So that's almost 35 years ago. And I don't have the numbers at my fingertips, but the emissions, the allowable emissions from the engines in that period and of that type can be more than 25 times what they are now. And we noted a significant amount of particulate soot from these types of engines. And so that is a concern for residents as well. Additionally, we'll be issuing a report that's going to have quite a bit on the health effects of sound and the disturbance of sleep, because as much as it might feel annoying, it does affect quality of life and health quite drastically. So with the total through truck ban, it would allow local truck traffic, which is primarily estimated to be occurring during daytime hours, because that's when most deliveries and local work is occurring. But it also prohibits through truck traffic at all hours, and that's typically going to reroute the trucks to Northern Parkway, which I'll speak about in a moment. We did also consider the nighttime through truck ban. It certainly does help to increase the resident health in terms of sleep disturbance, but it doesn't necessarily address the emission health concerns and sound to the same degree that a total through truck ban would. We also considered a variety of other options, including barrier walls, barriers, traffic management, pavement changes, building insulation, all of which were identified to either have concerns that, couldn't be done. Things like building insulation aren't necessarily something that the city can do for residents, especially with older construction. And all of those were identified to be less effective in terms of achieving the goals of protecting resident health most immediately. So next slide. So in looking at the effect of a through truck ban, I wanted to make sure that the implications of the residential locations were clear. So as you can see in the red circle at the bottom, the Camelback Road section of interest is surrounded by residential areas directly on both sides for most of it. Northern Parkway going up above has a significant amount of distance between the parkway itself and the nearest residences. The Northern Parkway is also free flowing. There aren't lights in the same way that there are along Camelback Road. So the starting and stopping aspects that have both emissions characteristics and sound characteristics that are negative are negated by that route as an alternative to Camelback Road. So next slide. So to wrap it up, these are the conclusions that our report draws, which everyone can read. So essentially, the effects of the truck traffic are detrimental to the residents, and mitigation measures are required for a safe and healthy environment. And we do think that even if one felt that things were acceptable now, because sound regulations are quite varied, and the guidelines from like the World Health Organization, for instance, are often exceeded, but in terms of actual laws broken, that's not necessarily something that's easy to define with the current existing laws. And the projection over time, though, of how many trucks are there is only going to make this problem worse. So with the variety of measures we considered, the full ban on through trucks is going to be the most effective in protecting resident health. And the partial truck ban would reduce noise levels and emissions, but to a lesser degree. And the other possibly feasible strategies would require significant cost, construction effort, time, and other drawbacks. So are there any questions from the group?
Thank you, Caitlin. Move on to now. Matthew is going to pick up. He's going to chime in on some comparisons. So talk a little bit more about the mitigation techniques, and then next steps for the city. Matthew.
Thank you, Keith. I would also like to take this time to say thank you to Caitlin and thank you for Bradley for both speaking with us tonight. We do appreciate it. I would like to apologize again. Well, first of all, let me ask, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Again, my apologies that I can't be there. I'll just be straightforward with you. Unfortunately, we're currently sharing the gift of COVID in my house. All my immediate family has it, so we're dealing with that. So if it wasn't for that, I would be there with you. Again, my apologies. But again, we thank both groups for presenting tonight. Next slide, please. Just some comparisons between the two studies. The MAG study found the through truck traffic ban could reduce truck traffic by 73%. Exponent agreed with the statistic. We've already seen how it's predicted to grow by 113%. As you see, Exponent thinks it'll be more than that. It's already 39% in just 2 years. Truck noise, of course, is anticipated to increase. A through truck ban would result in a 77% reduction in truck VMT, with probably a similar impact on vibration. We talked about different mitigation efforts, things such as rubberized asphalt. Rubberized asphalt is much quieter, but it's also much more costly. In fact, it's 37% more costly. It does reduce noise, but it's $230,000 per lane mile. And also, it loses its effectiveness over time. As you see, it loses half a decibel annually as the surface deteriorates. Another option would be to have increased the walls from 6 foot to 12 foot. If you know Camelback, there's some areas that are higher walls, some are shorter. That could reduce the noise. However, again, it's expensive. A 12-foot wall is estimated at $1,520 per linear foot. A lot of Camelback. On some of the exponent points, again, an overnight through truck ban will reduce trucks by 50%. The truck traffic, again, was the heaviest between 4 a.m. and 7 a.m. You saw those numbers that were demonstrated there. Currently, city ordinances do limit noise to 72 decibels. There are multiple locations of trucks at 71 decibels, and there was one actually at 86, well above the 72 law. Again, we've already talked about the expensive barrier walls. A through truck ban is estimated to reduce noise by 3.5 decibels. And again, as Caitlin said, Exponent found that there was abnormally high amount of truck traffic along Camelback Road, and that the truck traffic as it exists currently has detrimental effects on public health and welfare. Again, do some comparisons between the studies. Next slide, please. We're going to look at some different mitigation techniques. The first one, of course, is the through truck ban. Bree, if you'd click on my note on that one, thank you. That again would be to ban all through trucks on Camelback Road. Again, just to be clear, businesses located within the city limits are still permitted to use Camelback Road. Businesses that have pickup or deliveries in the city limits can continue to use Camelback Road. This was a confusing issue a few years ago because there were some misleading things that were said. Again, if your business is located within the city, if your business has a pickup or delivery within the city, they can still continue to do that. Nobody's looking to affect your grocery prices or pharmaceuticals, that sort of thing. Rather, the issue is through trucks. Another option would be a partial truck ban. As you saw, most of the trucks are at night when people are sleeping. Again, we look at ban trucks through nighttime hours. I suspect this would be likely a non-starter with the ATA, as this is the busiest time for truck traffic, especially for cement and gravel trucks. You know that if you drive Camelback early in the morning, you see this, especially in the summer. There's a lot of concrete trucks rolling at 4 and 5 a.m. We understand that. They're doing business, but they're also very loud, and that's when our residents are sleeping. Also, in a previous discussion between myself and ATA, I offered this proposal and was declined by the ATA. Another option would be sound barriers. Again, as it's already been said, they are effective at reducing noise, but they have little effect on pollution or vibration. Again, they're very expensive at a cost of $1,520 per linear foot. It would increase the walls up to 12 feet. Again, they're helpful with noise, but for those of you that live along Camelback, do you really want to have a 12-foot wall behind your house? Again, rubberized asphalt. It's helpful in noise reduction, but as you saw, it breaks down. It's also expensive. Last one would be speed reduction engine braking ordinance. You may have saw in the presentation, we've already done that. We did a ordinance a couple of years ago that limited engine braking. There is some of that still happens, but that has calmed down a good bit. Also speed reduction. We recently lowered the speed limits on Camelback and Litchfield Road to 35 miles an hour, and that does help. However, even with these things, even with the speed limits being lowered, even with engine braking being prohibited, the problem still exists. And of course, the big question is, I'm sorry, was there a question? Okay. The big question here is what's next? City staff is planning on making recommendations to city council at the November council meeting. You've seen different mitigation techniques, you've seen things that were discussed, and staff will be making recommendations later this month. With that being said, we thank you for your time and for your attention. Again, you have my apologies that I couldn't be there. Thank you again to Mag for your study and Bradley and Tim for being there for the work that you did. Thank you again, Exponent and Caitlin, for being here with us tonight. We appreciate your work as well. A lot of thought and planning went into this. And at this time, we're going to turn the Q&A over to Paige. Paige will be moderating the Q&A. She will have a microphone there in the audience, and we welcome your questions. Thank you again. Paige.
Thank you, Matthew. So for those of you that have filled out a comment card, I'm going to call out your name. If you could please raise your hand, I'll bring the microphone to you. First, we have Mr. Josovich.
Thank you. My name is Joe Stovich. I have lived in Litchfield Park since '86. We moved to Litchfield Range in 2005. One of the worst mistakes was buying a house. Okay. The study that day don't even discuss pollution. I mean, I have pictures here. I'll show you real quick. When it went down to the north, which is right over the wall, I'm talking. And I've got all kinds of pictures. And these trucks are polluting as well as the noise they create. I also have and I've given all the information to the city, to Matt. I also have a machine that measured the noise level. And I gave that to the city as well. And unfortunately, the noise level that we took is over 100 decibels. Okay, it's not down in 70 or 60, it's over 100 decibels. That is very, very, very bad. Okay, and you got to remember Litchfield Road, Camelback. Once you start going west on Camelback, it's a hill. Cheryl Brown lives there, I live there, Tex Mascot lives there, and then it goes down. So when they're coming west to east, after they dump all their cement, etc., they're not supposed to brake by engine braking, they do it anyway. And the noise level and the pollution level is extremely, it's unbelievable. I'm surprised you don't have a class action lawsuit and have them, start paying for medical. You're gonna have a lot of people that are getting sick, and this is what's gonna happen. But like I say, I just understand the solution is use Northern Parkway. That's what it was built for. You go up less than 4 miles on El Paraz Road, you get on Northern Parkway, and you go west. And this is not gonna stop. All these fields are now with buildings, and it's gonna continue. I mean, the golf course is gone on Camelback. All these vacant lots are now buildings, and it will continue. It's not gonna get less, it's gonna get worse. The asphalt's good, a higher wall would be helpful, but it's not gonna stop the noise and the pollution. The pollution is very, very heavy, and the noise is over, like I say, I think it to the city, I have a machine over 100 decibels. And the only time it's not as bad, Saturday night. Sunday. So on Saturday night, you don't have as much noise. But starting Sunday night, guess what? It goes for 6 days. And when the city implemented the truck ban, it was so healthy and so helpful. And the association, basically called us, that we hated truckers. We hate truckers, we hate noise, we hate pollution. What can I say? Anyway, any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer. I've been here 40 years.
Mr. Sovich. Next we have Mr. Tom Rathbun.
Get out of my chair. Thank you, ma'am. I've been a resident of Litchfield Green since 2006. Off and on here, stationed with 3 different times, and we retired here from both the Air Force and Southwest Airlines. Anyway, I live just a few doors down from Joe, and just 2 doors in from the Camelback Gate on the north side of Litchfield Green. A lot of great data gathering, a lot of hard work. Appreciate everybody doing that, both the Maricopa County governments and associate governments and the other organizations. The only issue I really have is it's kind of Joe brought up, it's just constantly getting worse. It's because they built all those warehouses and all that truck traffic out in the west to us. And of course, now they're building all these warehouses up by Loops. There's going to be more and more and more truck traffic. So the bank study was fine, but you're way behind on what the truck traffic increase is going to be, not even close. The other thing is, as a resident here, no one from MAG or the Southern Group Exponent, no one sent me a survey. No one's asked me, either emailed me a survey or mailed me a letter or sent me a text or asked me to comment to them and to tell them how many noise irritating events I have every night or every week. You know, why don't you ask the people that actually live here? Nobody's done that. And the last thing is these mitigating things like dropping the speed to 35 miles an hour and no truck braking. If there's no police out there to enforce it, it doesn't make a goddamn bit of difference. But there's nobody out there enforcing it. So what's the point? Anyway, thank you.
Mr. Rathbun, those were the only 2 that we had. Was there anybody else that had questions? Mr. Cody Brad.
Brad, could you talk real quick? You and I met back in April or May or whatever. And a couple things that were interested at the time that was on your slide wasn't really talked about. You studied over 8,000 vehicles, and you had 28 potential nuisance events, which is a 0.32% of all the events. Is that correct?
I don't remember the specific numbers, but
It's actually on your slide.
I'll agree with what you said. I just don't remember it either.
Okay, so again, we're talking about 0.32, less than 0.5% of potential nuisance events. We also go back and talk about the fact that we did the noise study. The consultant gave you the results and said there's no further reason to study because it doesn't meet the FHWA guidelines for excessive noise. So the rest of the study that studied potential nuisance events which weren't actually considered problematic. Is that correct?
I would describe it this way. If you look at the average noise level, whether that's across the day or across the night, it's low. This is when there aren't airplanes flying around, this is a very quiet place. And that's what the noise models, especially if you're looking like for what does federal highways do with sound walls, it's all based on average noise. But average noise levels don't wake people up. So that's why we looked at the difference between the ambient noise and see where there would be potential. But you're absolutely right, the average noise level is very low.
And the consultant originally said you don't need to continue studying this, and then you push them to study the 28 potential events.
No.
Correct?
No.
That's the recollection of my conversation.
Okay, I'm trying to recall the conversation. When we got the results from the consultant, we said to them that it's not helpful for you to tell us what the average is across the day. We need to look at these nighttime events. And we asked them to proceed with further analysis.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure. My name is Tony Bradley. I'm president of the Airport Trucking Association.
That's the last one that I have. Is there anybody else that has any questions, comments?
Dave Watson, and Mr. Williams, my understanding was originally that Northern was actually supposed to be designed as basically a throughway to get from I-17 to 303. But Peoria fought that, and that's why it kind of stops where it stops. Is that true?
Well, I'm afraid I haven't been working here at MAG long enough to know the history of that project. Sorry.
Well, I know I can tell you that it's slated now to go through to the 101. And the other municipalities have fought against the expansion of I-17, but I believe that it's still in the program.
Yeah, but what we're trying to do is channel that, for example, we do with the ordinary, basically the same thing. They with the trucks coming through there, so the parkway basically doesn't do much, it gets to where it ends now as a major thoroughfare, and then it gets back being in our arterial, just like Camelback is.
That's the way it is now. The plan, the program, it will eventually head towards I-17.
Right,
But as of right now, it stops where it does on Northern.
right.
McDOT is currently designing the interchange. And the ones that are creeping.
Right, don't we have the same, isn't the same fight going on between Peoria and trucks on that road and, Camelback?
That.
So I'm just trying to figure out where they gonna put the trucks. I understand getting off campus to move somewhere else and somebody else has a problem. And then you're gonna end up where you might get rid of it for a while, but what's gonna happen? Unless we figure out exactly how you keep trucks off the permit.
Well, that is part of the model, Bradley, there's future, there's current, there's future events, there's with truck vans, without truck vans, they have a number of models in the study that touch on a little bit more percent.
And as city manager, how do you suggest to council? Because I saw up there, they said we're going to present it to the council in November. What are the recommendations on a meeting in November to handle this problem?
Matthew, can you hear us? Matthew's the city manager. He's available in Zoom if you'd like to answer that one.
Sir, I'm sorry if I don't know who was speaking to me, but if I heard you correctly, you're asking me what are my recommendations going to be? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I will be making recommendations to council. So we will be having an executive session in November. I can't say yet what those are going to be, but I can tell you that staff will be making recommendations. I will be making recommendations to council this month. I can say that.
State your name, please.
Nobody. Is there any, public, obstruction to shifting the truck traffic to, say, our side, take them up to the Northern Parkway, out to the 303? I know I was in the construction business and they had a lot of trucks running, and I know we had to go certain routes within the city of Portland. At night and then during the day as well.
What I can tell you is our truck route is Dysart right now, so we have designated Dysart as our truck route.
So they could turn, well, can we shut down truck traffic between Dysart and the 303? Because we're gonna get more residential, when.
I mean, obviously, you can clearly say yes or no. Matthew, do you want to touch on that one?
I would say, sir, that is the question. As Keith said, Dysart is the truck route. He's 100% right. Dysart is there. Dysart, of course, goes to Northern, and I think most of us would agree that Northern Parkway is a better route for trucks for various reasons. That's why it was built. But again, it's being able to do what you're asking. I think you're asking the right question, sir.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
If that was to me, I couldn't hear the question.
I just asked
She was
if
asking.
somebody else had another question. Well, I think that's it, and that concludes our meeting tonight. We do thank you all for attending. As Matthew said, there will be recommendations made to council at the November 20th meeting. And we hope to see you there. Thank you, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.